Hello everyone, we're truly honored today to have Dr. Alon Ben-Meir with us here on CNN Greece, a professor of international relations at the Center of Global Affairs at NYU and a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute. Dr. Ben-Meir is an expert on Middle East and West Balkan affairs, and we will be discussing the current situation in Greek-Turkish relations, the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, and of course, the new day that emerges after the US elections. Dr. Ben-Meir, welcome to the program, and thank you for your presence here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Professor, we have been witnessing during the biggest chunk of 2020, even before that, of course, a series of unilateral, provocative actions of Turkey in the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean. Mr. Erdogan keeps sending a research ship in Greek territorial waters before it orders it to return to Turkey, but also his rhetoric is quite aggressive and it is aimed not just at Greece and Cyprus, but also at France. What does this say about his goals in the region and the means he's willing to use to achieve them, and what would be a proper and unified European response look like?
You know, we have to look in this in the context of his overall objective. Erdogan began, his career when he became prime minister by undertaking significant reforms, democratic reforms, in order to comply much with the EU requirement at the time. They were negotiating the possibility of integration. But as he changed his course, albeit it was not designed, not by accident, Erdogan today, what he is doing is trying to revive, which is very important to keep in mind, revive element of the Ottoman Empire. I look at a study which I'm just about completing this work. When you look at the map of the Ottoman Empire and what he is trying to do in reaching out or trying to establish strong relation, if not controlling many of the area that were at one time under the Ottoman Empire, the two maps look almost identical. So to answer your question, what he's trying to do in the Mediterranean in relation to Greece, in relation to Syria, this is part of his grand design to restore Turkey's influence as to the extent that the Ottoman Empire. I had a conversation many times with top officials, including former Prime Minister Davutoglu, Ibrahim Kalin, his right arms, on many occasions, and I was told clearly, you will see, Alon, by 1923, Turkey will have as much influence as the Ottoman Empire had in its heydays. So we have to look at it in this manner. To answer your question, what can be done about it, I think the EU ought to really look afresh, very fresh, at what Turkey is all about, examine its role in NATO, because Turkey is also violating significant elements of NATO or charter, and certain steps ought to be taken. And that is what I think the EU has so far has done very little to tell Erdogan that his conduct in the Mediterranean, his relations to Greece, his illegal search for oil in Greek territory, that must be stopped. And if he doesn't stop, significant punitive action ought to be taken against Erdogan. And President Macron said it very clearly. We see what's going on. It's time for us to take action, and I think it's overdue.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, last week, and probably in view of the upcoming European summit in Brussels, Mr. Erdogan has adopted a lighter political stance toward Europe, which is contrary to his other actions from Caucasus to the Mediterranean and North Africa. What does this mean?
Well, he's really a grand manipulator. He knows, and my conversation in Brussels time and again, the prospect of Turkey integrating into the EU is practically zero. He himself is not interested. But he's also trying to play in two weddings. He's maintaining a very good, close relationship with Putin, and he also wants to maintain some good relations with the EU. So trying to take advantage from both sides. So he cannot be trusted, even though he may be making these gestures. He cannot be trusted because he does not mean it. And I can tell you again from my own sources, I know that Erdogan is manipulating the EU, manipulating even Russia to some extent, and certainly Iran, in order to cement Turkey's position in the Mediterranean and the Balkans as well as the Middle East, of course.
Mm-hmm. In general, Professor, there's a lot going on in the Middle East. One could argue that it's more polarized than ever. And in the last few years, there has been intense coalition talks with Greece, Egypt, and Israel being central players. Do you think that the various three-party schemes and alliances will be pivotal for the developments in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East?
I absolutely agree with that. And I will also further extend this a bit. And I say this, with the normalization of relations between the UAE and Bahrain with Israel, and I'm hoping that this normalization will further expand to other Gulf states. What is going to be created is a crescent going from the Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean, which is going to Egypt. And of course, it could include now Greece as well. This is a crescent. These are all the countries together, the Arab state along with Israel through the Palestinian as well as Egypt to the Mediterranean. That kind of crescents need to be created in order to also confront Iran. That is, Iran will have that kind of barrier. So it is going to limit it considerably its ability to try to become the regional hegemon. And this is very, very important to do just in connection with Iran. This is also going to limit its influence in Syria to a great extent. And in general, now with the new Biden administration, we ought to, of course, look generally about Iran itself, what Iran is up to, and also begin to discuss again in our Iranian nuclear program.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you about the U.S. elections. Mr. Biden will be taking office soon, and his campaign has gone as far as to release a statement about the Democratic candidate's vision for U.S.-Greek relations. On the other hand, we have seen in recent years Turkey's role being significantly upgraded on the U.S. Geopolitical chessboard. Is this likely going to change? What is your take on this?
My feeling is, and my sources tell me without any question, that the Biden administration is going to take a completely different take on what Erdogan is doing and what it's all about in terms of his gross violation of human rights in Turkey itself, his outside adventure into Syria, what he's doing in the Mediterranean. So my understanding is that as soon as Biden, of course, he's got to deal with the coronavirus first, with the economy right here in the United States. That's going to be preoccupation, it's not the first few months. But then he will be able to focus on our relations with the EU, restore the friendship and the trust between the United States and the European community, our allies there. And he's going to have a very hard look at Turkey itself, what is Turkey is doing. And I know that at this point, the policy, the strategy to is being formulated as we speak, and it's going to manifest itself, I think, within the next 3-4 months, once President Biden settles down in his office, address the issue of the virus, and begin to think in terms of the larger role of the United States, which has been diminishing under Trump.
And lastly, Professor, give us your thoughts on Syria. This is an ongoing civil war that has caused a severe humanitarian crisis whose effects are still being felt. But what should we make of the current status in this conflict?
Well, Syria is obviously the greatest tragedy that happened since World War II. When you think in terms of how many, 600,000 are being killed, 11 million either refugees or internally displaced. The United States, under Trump in particular, has pretty much abandoned Syria, abandoned our very good friends, the Kurds, to the whims of Turkey. So the condition within Syria itself is terrible and will continue to be terrible for years to come. The main player today in Syria is Russia. And very little can happen in Syria unless without Russian consent. I'm hoping that the Biden administration, of course, is again to take a hard look at Syria, and we're going to have to re-engage because instability in Syria reverberates throughout the Middle East. By just one example, Iran being in Syria, trying to entrench itself, building military bases, which is prompting Israel to attack Iranian targets in Syria itself day in and day out. It doesn't make much of news, but I can tell you hundreds of Israeli attacks took place against Iranian installation in Syria. So this is a fact that could escalate at one point or another. So a solution to the Syrian crisis need to be found, but it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, not to speak of the fact half the country lays in ruin. You need hundreds of billions of, at least estimated maybe $200 billion to begin some kind of reconstruction. And there is no visible right now a political solution, given the fact that Sunni is still a majority there. They've had very little say in Syria all these years. So what sort of, can we actually put Syria together at one point? I'm hoping we will be able to, but it's going to take years before we can actually see a clear path to the future of Syria.
Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, thank you so much for your valuable contribution to our program. I truly appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you. Anytime. Thank you.
That's our stream today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to CNN Greece for more context analysis and all the information you need on the day's top stories. Have a good day.